Imagine trying to get money out from a card machine. You normally get 3 goes to enter your PIN number, then your account is locked. This is an example of counter-controlled iteration, which we learnt about last lesson. But what if we could enter your PIN number as many times as you liked? You could keep going while your PIN number was incorrect. This is a condition loop, and when we say condition, we basically mean a question. Is the PIN number right or wrong? There are actually 2 types of condition-controlled iteration. One where we check the condition at the start, and another where we check the condition at the end. Condition-controlled iteration at the beginning means that you ask the question at the beginning of your loop. The idea is that if you get your question right, your loop code may never execute. Let's take an example of someone logging in with a username and password. The program is going to expect a password of 1234. If it gets the correct input, it will print out login successful. If not, it will prompt the user to enter another password. The Python code for doing this might look as follows. The key line of code here is on line 3. What this is saying is while the password is not 1234, execute the next line of code on line 4, which will ask for a new password. The code will then loop back to line 3 and check again if the password is not 1234. Only once the password is equal to 1234 will the loop exit and we can run the print command to output login successful. Remember, the key thing to this type of loop is that your loop code may never run. What would have happened if at the first attempt you entered 1234 as your password? The variable password would have been equal to 1234 and the loop would have been skipped. Condition-controlled iteration at the end means that you ask your question at the end of your loop. This means that your code must run at least once, because you are asking the question at the end. Let's look at our username and password code again, but this time where the condition is at the end. Our code here is written in AQA pseudocode. This is our condition we're checking to see if the loop should continue. It is beneath the rest of the loop's code block. This means it will always execute the loop at least once. This has a benefit to our code. Notice how we only have one input command for the password. Python doesn't actually have an equivalent to this do until loop. We can create something that works like this using something called a break command. The break command is used to end a loop before it is actually completed. We can use them with for loops, while loops, and repeat until loops to allow us to exit the loop in special cases where certain conditions are met. Let's create our username and password code in Python using a break command so that our code will work like a repeat until loop. You can see that on line 2 we have said while true, which just means to loop forever. Then at the end of our loop on line 4 we have the following. This is the if selection statement we learned about in a previous lesson, and if the condition is met, we use the break command to exit the loop. Sometimes you might want to put one loop inside the other. The way it works is that you have an outer loop and an inner loop. For every loop of the outer loop, the inner loop will fully complete itself. So the inner loop will run all the way through many times over. Let's try and create a program that will print out your times table, such as the following. We would like to do this with nested loops. You can see that our outer loop, which uses the outer counter variable, loops 3 times for numbers 1, 2 and 3. Our inner loop, which uses the inner counter variable, loops 10 times for numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. If you look at our counter, the inner loop has counted from 1 to 10 3 times, once for each time our outer counter has incremented. This is because the inner loop is repeating every single time we loop through the outer loop. This has many uses, such as when we're trying to output a 2D array, which we'll learn about later in this course. So, condition-controlled iteration is used when you don't know how many times your program needs to loop. A condition is a question that will have a true or false answer. The condition can be run at the start or end of the loop. If it runs at the start, your loop may never run. If it runs at the end, your loop code must run at least once. At the start, you will use a while loop. At the end, you use a repeat until loop. Python does not support repeat until loops. The break command allows you to end loops early. If you have one loop inside another, it is called nesting. When you nest a loop, the inner loop runs to a finish before the outer loop runs once more.